G'day, welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism Bill, the ins and outs, what has happened. I did want to get into this on Friday or for the Saturday episode, but my brain just could not comprehend it after digging into everything and actually reading through the bill, or at least the majority of it, because a lot of it is just fluff. So much has come out. And this feels like the final nail in the coffin for the freedom of Australians. We'll take a very, very brief look at the numbers when it comes to the under 16 social media ban, but mostly we will tackle the reactions, what's happening next, what we can expect from today, if you're watching this on the Tuesday's bill, and the debate that will be happening in both the Parliament and the Senate for this legislation. Let's get into it. I'm Mark Pirotta, and this is the Mark Pirotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Pirotta Show.
It is crazy to think that new legislation is required in order to tackle terrorism in Australia. There aren't too many times where you sit there and say to yourself, do you know what would really stop a guy with a gun from going and shooting someone? 100 pieces of paper that all basically say, when people speak, violence happens. Now, there is no planet in which that, as a statement, is true. I have never once thought to myself, if someone speaks to me, then they are likely going to be committing violence against me. When someone has a hostage, do you say, we're going to go guns blazing? Or do you say, no, we're going to get a megaphone and we're going to speak to this person? When things are going wrong in your relationship, do you say fisticuffs first? Or do you say, maybe we should, just talk about this? There is never a situation where silencing speech is the correct response to a violent action. Speech, actually, is the only way to ensure that the violence does not continue. Now, there will always be exceptions to that rule. There will be people who feel as though they have been silenced, but it is that feeling of silence at the majority that causes violence to begin with. If you cannot speak, and you cannot get your ideas across through speech, then what other options do you have? Did the people in Iran, did they start to revolt against the government, put their own lives at risk because they were allowed to speak freely? Or is it because there was such strict laws imposed upon them that they could not even share their opinions without being hunted down by the government? What is it that causes violence? Outside of the historical blood feuds that exist, outside of a general disdain that people have for their opposition, it is, as Charlie Kirk says it, when speech stops, civil war happens. The government is attempting to push through legislation that will silence voices, that will imprison groups, that will ban organizations simply for existing, not for breaking any rules and laws that currently exist inside of our society, but simply for existing. Yes, their ideology may be reprehensible. Yes, the things that they say may be ill-advised. But to silence that speech is to force people into a dungeon of their own thoughts. When speech is allowed out in the open, it can be rebuked. If you allow someone to sit with that, the hatred only grows. A man who has never seen a white man before, or a man who has never seen a black man before, will think of them something because they never got the chance to speak, to realize that they are just another man with children at home who wants to get bread on the table, and in doing so, you create an enemy out of someone who could have been a friend. I don't agree with the majority of people on this earth. Many of the people in my friend group, many of the people in my family, we have disagreements all the time, even on the littlest things. Some of my ideology might be thought to be hateful by the people who I count as my best friends in this world. But we speak, And when we speak, we come to a conclusion that our ideology is not so deep that it stops us from seeing the humanity behind the voice. But if all you ever hear is one side of a story and all you ever think is one set of thoughts, and you never allow a conversation to happen, that is when violence becomes the norm. The government's bill is the most radical attack on free speech in Australian history. The mere existence of this bill is a definitive destruction of everything that we have been told is the truth for the better part of 20 years. Multiculturalism is a lie. It is not possible. Multi-ethnic groups can live in unison, but their culture must be unified through one way of life. And for all of the toing and froing between Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, those are two groups who cannot live side by side peacefully and in unison. It is not possible. It is written into the text of the Quran that the Jews must be slaughtered. It is written into the code of almost every Islamic nation, their constitution, their creed, that the destruction of Israel is paramount. We are not speaking about people who can live side by side as religious groups peacefully. Christians, as a general rule of thumb, are a peaceful people. The Muslims that you do see as your neighbor, as a general rule, are peaceful people. That does not mean that the ideology that people prescribe to can be seen as equal. And in a society which prioritizes equality, how can we live side by side with people who want us dead? That is not to say that your local chef, your local cook, your local Uber driver wants you dead every time you get into his car or every time he feeds you. That is to say that the ideology that they prescribe to wants you dead. Now, they may have the intellect to understand what that means at a deeper level. The problem is, as with most faiths, that the fundamentals is where most people stop. Even in the Christian religion, the fundamentals are where most people stop their search for God, their search for the deeper truths of what the Bible actually teaches. And so when we say Islamic fundamentalism, the first thought in people's minds is always, it's only a small group of people. But I will say this, fundamentalism is more than likely the highest number of people in Islam. The ones who go and read scripture or listen to it from a preacher. Now, there are very good preachers. One of them is my friend in Islam. The Muslim society has its own way of teaching, but the number of radicals online, the number of radicals in our public life today is only growing. We only recently heard a report that over 230 extremists are currently in Australia right now in a training program, which is effectively a de-radicalisation training program, the majority of whom are under the age of 18. And it goes to a broader point that the Israeli government has been speaking about for a very long time as well. It's very easy to say that X number of children died over in Gaza, but with the way that extremists teach their children, and with the way that lesser IQ from an age perspective people view Islam, at a fundamental level, the religion in and of itself is violent. It calls for the death of those around them who do not prescribe to their ideology for the sake of their God. It calls them to be militant. It's why we see so many radical youth in the Islamic movements. In this country right now, there is only one voice who is saying what needs to be said, at least at the highest levels. We can throw in Andrew Hastie, but Pauline Hanson is the only one who is truly calling this out for what it is. It is a bad ideology. Good people mixed up in bad teachings. On that note, let's get into the bill. Let's get into what it is. We're just going to take a quick summary look at the perspective of someone whose opinion we can trust, at least most of the time. Andrew Hastie, who goes through a very, very good dissertation on what the bill says, why it says it and why he opposes it on principle. Watch.
Had a great summer. I hope you're feeling refreshed because this new year has kicked off very quickly with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese proposing sweeping hate speech laws. Parliament will be recalled to Canberra on Monday to debate a new bill, the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism Bill 2026. It's a big bill. There's a lot in it, as you can see by the printed version of the exposure draft and the explanatory memorandum. There's a lot to consider and very little time in which to do so. From the top, I'll be voting no to this bill. I'll be voting against it for two main reasons. The first is this bill is an attack on our basic democratic freedoms: freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. Those three freedoms are fundamental to any democratic society. They're hard-won, and they've served Australians well for more than 100 years. This bill will reduce them, and that's why I'm voting no. But secondly, the Prime Minister is showing absolute contempt for normal parliamentary process. For a bill of this size, we would normally take a few months to consider it. It would go into a committee process and the public would have an opportunity to make submissions. There would be public hearings. MPs and senators would debate it and they would consider fully the unintended consequences of this bill. Instead, the Prime Minister has reduced that process to a couple of days. And I think that shows the arrogance of this Labor government. Moreover, there is a Royal Commission now which will make a sweeping examination of the December 14 Bondi Beach terror attacks. And wouldn't it be wise if we waited for the Royal Commission to report its findings and then act prudently as a parliament so that we make the best possible changes if they are needed?
The truth in what Andrew Hastie has to say is right at the end there. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, Anthony Albanese has effectively backflipped on two major issues. The Royal Commission being the first one. And what he did with the Royal Commission is exactly what we expected him to do with it. It is a softball approach to a Royal Commission that fails to actually address the issue. The issue is this: radical Islam. If you can't say it, if you can't speak its name, how can you address the issue? The problem with what Anthony Albanese has done is quite simple. He has put a timestamp on when and how this Royal Commission must be completed. But at the very least, it is there. With it being there, doing the investigative work to actually find out what it is that caused the issue that we saw on Bondi Beach, why are we pushing through legislation in the way that we are? Now, Anthony Albanese and his coterie of Labor MPs are not alone in this problem. Susan Ley has been calling for this. Anthony Albanese is partaking in a practice of ensuring that his enemies fail and ensuring that the Australian people do not get what they need. The way that he has pushed through half wins in order to push the blame back to the opposition rather than getting an actual victory for Australians has been ludicrous to watch. A half-assed Royal Commission and now an overextended bill which will see the freedoms of Australians stripped, the speech of Australians stripped, and then hitting the podium in front of the Australian people and telling us, do not be afraid, the terrorists won't win. When you have to impose laws on Australian citizens in order to ensure that they will be safe, the terrorists have already won. If their action causes you to have a reaction, which is not to hunt them down and get them out of our country, then all you are achieving is exactly what they wished from the beginning. They hate us for our freedom, is one of the greatest quotes in human history. They hate us for our freedom. And you have fallen right into their basket case of ideologies. And you have said to yourself, you know what we ought to do? Reduce our freedom so they feel more safe. We are quickly becoming a country in Australia which kowtows to the loudest voice. Now, the loudest voice in any room for anyone who's ever been on a plane is a baby crying. And that's what most of these people's IQs, their behaviors, and their emotional state can effectively be whittled down to. They are like children crying on a plane. We're all listening, and no one wants to hear it. Unfortunately, making these sorts of little please do's is kind of essential. I enjoy doing it just for the fun of it, but at the same time, if you want to get a message out, you need the people in your community to just comment, like, subscribe, all of the normal jargon, right? Please just take a moment and give me a hand. We need to create a culture of commentary together. And I love the messages coming in my DMs. Put it in the comments section so that everyone else can see it too. Thank you. As I stated earlier in the episode, the only person who has come out of this with any grace whatsoever is the only person who will not be and should be inside of the Senate tomorrow, today when you'll be watching this. Pauline Hanson has been a light in this issue. From the moment that she stepped foot at Bondi and was embraced by those around her, she has been the only voice to call this for what it is, a radical Islamic attack against Australians, the Australian way of life, and of course the Jewish community. Let's take a listen to Pauline Hanson as she speaks to the media on what this is, why this has happened, and what we need to do in order to combat it.
Politician that says the truth.
I think what Australia is lacking now with both the major political parties is leadership. And people have got to a stage, they're fed up. They've had enough. They're struggling with cost of living. But I think that's also seen what happened at Bondi. And I think prior to that with Charlie Kirk, his assassination has been a big wake-up call for a lot of Australians. Mass migration has also been a huge, big issue for a lot of Australians. They've been now for years calling out to this government, pull back on it. Lack of housing, jobs, security, cost of living. It's a combination of a lot of things. And what they're looking for is someone who really cares about their country, about them, and about the future of the nation. I put out clear policies now for 3 decades. On the 2nd of March, I was first elected to this parliament 30 years ago. I've never given up for what I believe. We need to fight for this country, our cultural identity, who we are as Australians. It is not racism to call out or criticise policy, which both major political parties have tried to advocate that I am. Australians now are realising that I'm a proud, patriotic Australian that wants to fight for them on these issues. I've put up and I have spoken very loud and clear against the voice, the first one against the voice, about the COVID-19 jab. It was also about the mass migration. It's also been about the climate change, net zero, all these things. The public are no longer being, treated like mushrooms. They want to know what the hell is happening in their country. They want that leadership. They want people to put out clear policies that is going to get them out of this quagmire that we are in at the moment and start fighting for them. That's our job as members of Parliament, to represent the people.
Nigel Farage has been meeting in the UK talk for a while. Is that the high benchmark that you're aiming for yourself as well?
I've been around long before Nigel Farage and long before Trump. So therefore, I've set the record, my record, what I want. Go and look at my speeches, what I've said in the past. I don't back away from anything. I stand up for what I believe in. And that's why now the people are seeing I have been someone who stood my ground over the years, that a lot of things that I've said and done over the years has now happened in the country. Why do you think what's happened in Bondi? Do you think it was by chance? To criticise this, and it is about Islam. It is about the people that we brought into the country. They're not people compatible and suitable for this country. Why do we now have to turn around and make laws to start reining them in?
There is something unsettling about the prophetic nature in which Pauline Hanson's speech for the last 30 years has culminated into the situation that we are in now. She has basically hit every nail on the head for 30 years. She's been called every name under the sun. And from the very beginning, all she has done is effectively say, this is what Australia is. If you believe, and you can, and you will submit to its ideology, come, make this country your home, give unto it, and it will give unto you. We will look after you if you help us. What we have done for the course of the last 15 to 20 years is effectively tell people, come, look how much we have, take what you will, do what you want. That is not a way to build a society. You can't build a home that way. Why would you try and build your nation that way? Australia has been on this path now for about 20 years. From the end of the Howard government, as we entered into the sorry era under Kevin Rudd, we have been a nation in decline, apologising for our history instead of taking it for what it is, learning from it, saying we will not do it again, and moving forward as a nation that creates things. When was the last time you heard Australia in the news for something good? When was the last time that we were really, really proud of our athletes? When was the last time that we stood on the world stage and said, we are Australia, we are Australians, and the world didn't laugh? I don't remember it. I think that the only thing I can seriously think of is the 2006 World Cup, right in that pocket. Pauline has been calling for this for 30 years, and people are starting to notice. A recent poll came out which indicates that Pauline Hanson's One Nation is now polling higher than the Liberal Party. At 23 points, they are beating the Liberals by 1 point, who sit on 22, with Labor currently sitting at around 33 to 35. This poll is a seismic shift in the way that Australia does politics. It is the first time ever that one of the two major parties has not been Liberal, Labor, Nationals. But what are the numbers actually telling us? The way that the polls have shifted indicates to many people that One Nation is simply taking Liberal voters. And to an extent, they are correct. But in the most recent poll, Labor dropped 3 points. Those voters aren't going to One Nation. Those voters are going to the Liberals. The Liberals, with their soft policies, as I have said previously, are going to start dragging voters who are no longer inclined to believe Labor's lies. However, this does mean an end to what is currently the Liberal Party. Tomorrow, in the Senate, they will vote. The omnibus package, which was initially 130-odd pages of insane legislation, sprinkled with some good stuff, has been split in two. The first package, which effectively just handles gun laws and gun legislation, and the second, which tackles hate speech, hate groups, racial vilification, and a whole host of other freedom-ending legislation. Now, the silver lining in this is that Australia has never been very good at actually utilising the laws that it has on the books. As many people have come out and stated, the laws that need to exist already exist. The laws that were required in order to stop or at least hinder an attack like this already exist. So why were they not used? Is it our laissez-faire attitude that has caused this? Or is it our willful ignorance to the fact that not all ideas are the same, not all groups of people are the same, and yes, not all faiths are the same? The prerequisite to Christianity was Judaism. It's the reason that we say Judeo-Christian, though I know many people on the right do not like this term. But Judaism is the building block upon which Christianity was able to spread its wings. And Islam is the faith that sought to destroy it from within. The premise of Islam is that it takes from the Christian Bible and the Judaic texts. It picks and chooses what it wishes in order to subjugate its people, in order to justify its heinous actions, and leaves the parts that make Christianity the peaceful religion that it is. The religion that ended slavery, the religion that created equality between men and women, the religion that allowed for peace between peoples in order for societies to flourish. There is no two-way street on this. Yes, you have a right to believe what you wish to believe, but that should not come at the hindrance of the faith and the hindrance of the people who built this nation to begin with. Now, religious freedom is often cited as something that cannot be infringed upon. But if you look at the way that religious freedom was added into the text of constitutions across the Western world, it was made holy and good for a religious Christian people, not for every faith, not for every idea. It was used as a separation of powers between state and church. It was the clause that protected the faithful from the politician and from the government. Inside of each of those constitutions, it also enshrines the fact that there is a separation between the religion, the faith, and the state. But that was only made holy and good for a Christian population. Now, we have the ability in this nation and as Christians to live side by side with people. People who do not agree with us, people who do not see eye to eye with us, but who we do have a reasonable ability to convert. Maybe not in faith, but at least in practice. For a long time, assimilation allowed for this. But by the numbers, it is now impossible to assimilate the number of people who are being allowed into this country every year. The laws that would protect Islam within this hate speech bill are listed within one specific clause, which states that when citing religious texts, you are not under any form of legal threat from the government by this new bill. Now, I don't know of, have never heard of, and don't think I will ever hear of a Christian proper religious institution which preaches hate. Yes, there are things in the Bible that are bad. Yes, it is the word of God. But the moral history of what was the Old Testament is that it was made holy and good for the people of that time. You do not get from the bottom of the staircase to the top of the staircase on the moral spectrum overnight. We fell to the bottom. And so the laws that were created for the people of that time were made holy and good for them. If you try and teach a baby how to run before he can even roll over, he will never learn to roll over, and so he will never learn to walk, and he will never learn to run. The Old Testament is more a history of humanity reaching a moral good, reaching the path to heaven, than it is a dictation on how you ought to live your life. There are 10 rules that truly exist in the Bible. They are the 10 commandments. Those 10 commandments, in no way, shape, or form, infringe on your right to be free. Every one of those laws is still applicable today in this moral society. The law and the way of life of Jesus is what built the way of life that we have today. Islam has no claim to that. Hinduism has no claim to that. Judaism, to an extent, does, although it misses the final step. And so there needs to be a reckoning of sorts in this country that the faith that exists to protect you and your rights is Christianity. The faith that allows you to be free is Christianity. The religious freedom clauses within the Constitution are built entirely around Christianity. It is not made holy and good for any other peoples. And so when you enter this country with the faith that you have, practice it. But do not pretend as though it is equal to the faith that built nations, to the faith that did not subjugate its people, but allowed them to be free, and that allowed them to become what they are today, the Western world. The other crazy piece of this legislation has been the hate groups clause. Now, the hate groups clause is without a doubt the most gulag-style, communist-coded, radical piece of legislation that I've ever seen. It still remains within the bill. Approximately 2% of the original draft has been removed. We do not know exactly how much, because despite the fact that it will be voted on and likely passed tomorrow between the senators from the Greens passing the guns legislation and the senators from the Liberals passing the hate speech legislation, we do not actually know right now what laws will affect us as of 10 p.m. tomorrow. What we do know is this. A government of power having the authority to legislate what a hate group is, put that into law, and then create a system that from there allows anyone associated with funding or in any way, shape, or form supporting that hate organization to be placed under the fire of the judicial system. That is to say, that the target group of this legislation, which is very clearly the NSN, any supporter of theirs, buy me a coffee, subscription basis, t-shirt wearers, jumper wearers, anyone who has simply done something like that could be the target of legislation, could be the target of the judiciary. The leader in and of themselves can go to jail for 15 years. Now, 15 years is the same amount on average that we charge people for rape in this country. Who decides what is a hate group? Who decides what is hate speech? Who actually gets to define, yes, that is hate. No, that's not hate. Senator Babbitt came out and said that if he sees this legislation pass tomorrow, if he is ever in power or in authority in the role that is needed in order to pass this, which is the AFP minister, then he will ensure that every group from the LGBTQ community, from the pro-Palestine movement, and from every movement the left-wing organizations deem to be their central foundational protest groups would be added to that list. Now, obviously, he does not mean this, but the sentiment stands. You today get to decide what hate is. If you're on the left wing of politics and you are currently in power, today you do get to decide. But tomorrow you might not. Put the shoe on the other foot. Understand what is actually happening. What is happening right now is that the government is creating a two-tiered system. It is us and them. This is the start of every communist regime ever, that they get to decide who is undesirable. Let's listen to Tony Burke, who is likely the Führer-in-chief at this time, who has been spitting venom effectively since this happened, who has never once pointed out where this came from, who has only targeted one group, really. He whispers about Hizb ut-Tahrir, but in theory, they're just there as a padding softener so that the right wing of politics doesn't revolt overnight. Because I promise you, they may be added to the list, but they will not be prosecuted. The only people who will be prosecuted right now are on the right wing of politics. But you don't want to know what tomorrow brings if in 2 years' time, one nation gets in. Your groups will be decimated, and I don't want to see that. Yes, they are vile in my opinion. Yes, their ideology is ridiculous in my opinion. But you do not go to jail simply for having an ideology that I do not agree with. Let's listen to Tony Burke.
We need to respond to hatred with the ferocity of laws that are carefully targeted. And I must say, in terms of hate speech, I wish we were going harder than we're able to go tomorrow, but we deal with the parliament we have. And I acknowledge the member for Wentworth, who's also been arguing on hate speech laws for...
Almost the entire Australian population has come up against this. Even David Shoebridge came out and said that he is against this. I do not know any single person who has come out and said they support this. No left-wing voices, no right-wing voices. Because I do believe that at a majority, the Australian people actually understand where this goes. They can two-foot this issue, but the Labor Party cannot. Or, and here's the more cynical thought process, they know and they do not care. Because in their minds, they will never be unelected. The Great Replacement theory has been a theory for a very long time. But with the way that Labor is ramping up immigration, it no longer feels like a theory. It feels like fact. Are we seeing the start of the next Bolshevik revolution? Are we seeing the start of the next Maoist terror group? I don't mean to be so cynical, but it makes no sense to me that the Labor government would still be pushing this legislation, considering the fact that I've seen zero voices say that it's a good idea. The gun legislation, yes. The gun legislation, and I can see the reasoning behind it. I think it's silly, because at the end of the day, these guys also made bombs out of tennis balls. And it's topically relevant at the moment, considering the fact that the Australian Open is currently happening. Should we ban all tennis balls? Was it the tennis balls that did it? How do we know that the next great serve from Novak Djokovic isn't actually going to be a bomb that hits his opponent and blows up? It could just magically transform itself into a bomb overnight. The guns are just the tool. The house does not build itself. It needs a person to do that. But the rest of the legislation is effectively a big spit in the face of Australians. No one wants this. Not from the left, not from the right. It is only what looks like the current uniparty. And this is the prediction that I'll make, and we will end with this. I wanted to get onto the under-16s ban, but I ranted for about 45 minutes. The way I see things running is this. Over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, One Nation is going to take up 35 to 40% of the vote. The Liberals will drop to approximately 15%, and Labor is going to drop to under 40%. When that happens, the Liberals and Labor are going to join together. They will form their own unholy coalition for fear of the extremism that One Nation will bring. Labor currently has zero policies to improve the way of life that we are currently seeing the trajectory headed towards in Australia. If anything, every single one of their pieces of legislation has not only backfired, but has seemed intentionally making Australians poorer. Everything from their green energy scam to their housing policies and now to hate speech regulations, we are seeing nothing short of the beginning of tyranny in this nation. For those who are not currently engaged in politics, your homework for this week is simple. Learn who your local member is, your local senator, and email them. Tell them how you feel. If you want to go find a really good resource right now, look up TP Australia, Turning Point Australia, or go to Joel Jamal's page, and he currently has a list of all of the sitting senators. He's there on Instagram. If you click the link inside of his bio, the top link there will allow you to see every single email for every single senator. I suggest you can copy that email list, BCC it into your email, and once you do that, do not use the formatted text because that has likely already been blocked. Write your own piece. Tell them why you do not like this legislation. If you can't read all the legislation, put it through ChatGPT and tell it to give you a summary as to why this is so bad for freedom. Go follow people like Oz vs. The Agenda. Go follow people like Joel Jamal. Go follow people like Two Worlds Collide. We have an opportunity right now. This is the silver lining. We have an opportunity right now to show the Australian population that the ideology of the left falls into tyranny. That your speech is silenced is to say that your liberty is choked. It was George Orwell who said that if liberty means anything at all, it means that I have the right to tell you what you do not want to hear. Freedom of speech is the fundamental building block of a Western society, of a democracy, and of freedom. That will do us for the show today. My name is Mark Pirotta. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please leave a comment. Please leave a like. Again, I'm very sorry that I did not do an episode on the Saturday. My brain did not function. I don't know what was going on. My brain just was not all there. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe where you can. Go support all of these content creators. Oz vs. The Agenda specifically, he will be going live tomorrow from 2 p.m. Go support them. If you have $5 to give, go support them with $5. They will likely need it if this legislation passes, because chances are they'll be listed as a hate group. This is the Mark Pirotta Show. I will speak to you guys on Thursday. God bless.